able to give a clear description of what it means that the United States will run Venezuela. They've watched the president and Secretary of State suggest that Cuba should be next. It's time for Congress to get its ass off the couch and do what the Constitution mandates that we do, the Constitution that we take an oath to. We have to put this before the American people, not just in private settings, but in public hearings by the key oversight committees, intelligence, armed services, foreign relations in both houses, and explore whether the United States should enter into yet another war with unforeseen consequences, both to the United States, our troops, and our region, and focus our time and energy on wars outside our shores when we should be focusing them on building up the American economy and protecting American people here at home. Last thing I'll say, then I'll open it up for questions. 2 days ago, we started the 250th year of American democracy. Those who declared their independence on July 4, 1776, included a lot of Virginians. And the Virginians designed and passed in our General Assembly the day after July 4, 1776, a state motto, Sic Semper Tyrannis, that still adorns the flag of our Commonwealth. It was a battle against tyranny. It was a battle by freedom-loving people to push off the rule by an executive that was unresponsive to people's elected representatives. The power to declare war was one of the most jealously guarded powers that the framers debated in Philadelphia at the time that they came up with the Constitution in 1787. And they very carefully, and in a way very different than other nations, said this power should be reserved to Congress, because we've seen executives, we've watched kings, emperors, czars, monarchs, popes decide they're going to wage war on their own, often for illegitimate reasons, without the check of a public debate, without the check of a vote by people's elected representatives. And so our Congress made the wise decision that we would not put our troops in harm's way unless there had been that debate before the American public and a ratifying vote by Congress. It's no surprise that President Trump wants to end-run Congress on war. He wants to end-run Congress on the imposition of tariffs, taxes. He wants to end-run Congress by not spending congressionally appropriated dollars. He wants to end-run Congress in every way possible because he believes that Congress is irrelevant. It's up to members of Congress, the Senate and the House, to demonstrate whether they believe they're irrelevant. If we accept the constitutional oath that we've taken, we have to stand up against the president's ability to secretly take us into war without consulting with Congress. And I intend to do this repeatedly in the year to come and try to demonstrate that the institutions that were put in place at the foundation of this nation still have vitality, and we're not a nation that wants to devolve back to tyrannical decision-making by an executive prone to erratic, chaotic, overreaching decisions. With that, I'm glad to open it up and take your questions.
Okay, we are very limited on time, so folks, please stick to one question and try to keep it brief. With that, we'll go to Tom from WTTG.
Senator, thanks for doing this today. Nicolás Maduro has a 25-page indictment waiting for him in New York. He negated an election in his own country in 2024. There are reports of celebrations in the streets of Caracas today. How do you and your colleagues, though, moving forward, thread this needle between Nicolás Maduro not being a good guy and also making these points about your concerns about how the War Powers Act was used and that they're just planning on how they're going to run the country now? It seems like there's a quagmire possibility here.
And Tom, we've been in quagmires in the Americas for decades, if not centuries, because of decisions just like this. Nicolás Maduro is horrible. He's run his country into the ground. And the argument that this is in Venezuela's interest or that there might be other positive reasons are exactly the kinds of things that you could debate on the floor of Congress to determine whether this is the kind of use of the American military that should be allowed. but you do it by having a debate before the public and then having a vote. And that's the way the framers intended it to be. You don't allow a president to go his own way, because if a president can go his own way and say, well, there was an indictment, there was an indictment against Nicolás Maduro. Do you know how many people in other countries in the world right now are subject to U.S. indictments or U.S. sanctions? Should we just allow the president to decide to wage war in secret and without notification of the public or Congress to execute an arrest warrant? Is that what the standard is now? No, that's not the standard, and it shouldn't be the standard. I am so worried about this president violating these careful legal precedents. It's okay to invade the sovereignty of another nation. If it's okay for the United States, the U.S. is sending the message that it's okay for anyone. It's okay to kill struggling sailors clinging to shipwreck in the Caribbean who have been put on a secret list and designated as combatants that they don't know about. If it's okay for the United States to do it, then it's okay for other nations to do it as well. I believe the U.S. should stand for elevated standards of following law, not race to the bottom and eliminate those standards. And that's what President Trump has done. So the answer to your question is the way you thread the needle is you have a debate about what's at stake. And if Congress believes we should be at war, then let members of Congress put their own name on it. Instead, what we've seen is members of Congress who frankly lack the guts, lack the backbone, lack the courage to have that debate, and they've been willing to allow an increasingly declining and erratic president to make these decisions without them.
Next, we'll go to Randy from Telemundo.
Senador, buenas tardes, muchas gracias. Déjeme preguntarle brevemente qué es lo que más le preocupa a usted de este operativo militar que acaba de pasar en Venezuela.
Pues hay muchas cosas en este guerra. ¿Qué va a pasar mañana en Venezuela? ¿Qué va a pasar con los Estados Unidos si el presidente está diciendo que vamos a manejar Venezuela? Es un desastre para los Estados Unidos manejar Venezuela. No pudimos manejar Irak, no pudimos manejar Afganistán. El presidente no puede manejar la economía de los Estados Unidos ahorita. No puede manejar el gobierno de los Estados Unidos ahorita. Y el presidente piensa que podemos manejar un otro país. Es un pensamiento bien confundido de este presidente. También tengo una preocupación sobre guerra contra Cuba. En esta reunión de prensa, hace pocas horas, el presidente y secretario Rubio está ofreciendo un mensaje que Cuba va a ser el próximo. El presidente está hablando sobre acción militar contra Nigeria, contra Irán, contra otros países. ¿Qué va a pasar en el futuro con un presidente que piensa que no necesita un debate o voto en Congreso? Entonces, estoy bien preocupado sobre las consecuencias en Venezuela, pero también estoy preocupado sobre el mensaje que los Estados Unidos están mandando al mundo. Es tiempo para el Congreso y presidente a tener un foco en las necesidades de los americanos, de nuestros votantes, nuestros constituyentes, la economía americana. No tenemos tiempo o recursos o atención para resolver problemas en cada parte del mundo.
Next, we'll go to Allison from WSET.
Hi, Senator Kaine. Thanks for taking the time with us today. My question for you is, the Trump administration is saying that they're doing all of this because of narco-terrorism and, the distribution of illegal drugs. What would you say is a better course of action to keep those drugs from hitting the streets?
Well, I'll answer your question, Allison, but let me slightly correct your question, because that is not really what the administration is saying. They have said this is about narco-trafficking. They have also said that this is designed to change out the regime of Nicolás Maduro and usher in another leader. There is another Venezuelan leader who just received the Nobel Peace Prize. But the president said today she was not trustworthy enough to be Venezuela's new leader. So the president wants to change the regime to whom? The president and his assistants are also saying this is about allowing Americans to seize oil in Venezuela. The administration is sending deeply mixed messages about what is in fact the purpose of this military operation. The right strategy with respect to Venezuela has been to offer humanitarian assistance to victims of the regime and put deep pressure on the government for its anti-democratic and illegal behavior through sanctions. Sanctions haven't worked particularly well in Venezuela, and one of the reasons is this. Sanctions regimes tend to work when the whole global community joins in the sanctions regime. But President Trump's repeated discussions back into his first term about the possible use of US military action in Venezuela scared nations away from joining the United States to put sanctions pressure on Venezuela. And so there are other tools, diplomatic tools and economic tools that the United States can use. The use of the US military is to be deemed a last resort and should only happen after a debate and vote in Congress.
Next we'll go to V from Under the Desk News.
Hey, V.
Hey, thanks so much. Question from the internet, from the TikTok side of things is, folks are wondering what you can do to kind of grab this administration by the lapel and say, stop, right? Like, you didn't have the approval from Congress to do this. What budget do we have to put Rubio and Hegseth in to run the country? How are we going to really get a handle on what's going on, and what's your plan for this week?
The only way that this can be stopped is for Congress to stop it. And there's two mechanisms that Congress can use to stop it. The first is passing a war powers resolution mandating that this military action stop, that there should be no war in Venezuela unless Congress affirmatively declares it. That is a resolution that I filed before Christmas that is ripe for consideration in the Senate as soon as we get back. Now, to be sure, it has to pass both houses of Congress. The president can veto it. We would then need to override the veto. But members of Congress should not be lemmings following Donald Trump. Instead, they should insist on what the Constitution requires: no war without a vote of Congress. The second thing Congress can do, and it's timely right now because we are in the midst of an appropriations discussion, is put within the defense appropriations bill a prohibition on use of funds to prosecute any military action in Venezuela. There is such a proposal on the table that Senator Jeff Merkley has filed and that I am a co-sponsor on. And as we take up the appropriations bill in January in the Senate, we will press for a vote on that. But we are in the minority as Democrats. We need Republicans to come out from under the desk and uphold their responsibilities instead of just following along quietly with what a president does. War powers resolution and appropriations prohibitions, those are the two congressional mechanisms that will be on the table when we get back to Washington Monday.
Great.
Next we'll go to
Senator.
Steve from WHRO.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, Senator. So we're being told that this operation has been in the planning stages for months. At the same time, they've been saying to Congress and to the rest of the country that regime change was not the plan here. Do you feel that you've been lied to by this administration? And sorry for the double barreled, but can you say, give me more details? What have you been told about how this operation actually worked physically and what the plan is to run Venezuela?
I will say this. The members of the Senate and the public have definitely been lied to by the administration, but I'm not surprised at all, because it was plain to me when the administration took the first boat strike on September 2nd, and then I reviewed the facts about the strikes in classified setting. And when I read the classified legal memo, which I found to be so completely specious and worthless and a misstatement of what the law of presidential war powers was, it was plain to me that the administration was plowing ahead and was going to do something like this. That's why I asked Congress to vote a couple months back on a resolution that said no war in Venezuela without a vote of Congress. members of Congress at the time, every Democrat supported it and 2 Republicans did. Many Republicans said, oh, the president's not going to do it. He tells us this is a bluff. He tells us this is a negotiating tactic, etc. Okay, now it's happened. And anybody who was pretending otherwise cannot pretend anymore. And that makes me hope that we'll get more votes on the resolution when it's called up this week, my bipartisan resolution.
Next, we'll go to Caleb from WCYB.
Yeah, Senator Kaine, you've talked a lot about your opposition to this because the president hasn't gotten the approval of Congress. But if Congress was having that debate right now on the floor, at this point, would you be in favor of some sort of military action in Venezuela?
Absolutely not. I would not be in favor of it. As somebody who lived in Latin America and has a lot of friends in the region and has paid careful attention to the repeated efforts of failure when the United States has tried to intervene in the domestic politics of other countries, I think it's a disastrous idea. I also have spoken to Virginians about the cost of forever wars on the Virginia families whose sons, daughters, spouses have deployed again and again and again and again since 2001 on wars around the world, including wars such as the war in Iraq that most agree now we never should have entered. I don't believe the American public wants more forever wars. I don't think they want the US military to be engaged in a war against Venezuela or a war against Cuba. But if we have that debate on the floor of the Senate, and I'm unsuccessful in persuading my colleagues, and they do vote for military action, I will be disappointed. I will think that they made a wrong decision, but I will acknowledge that at least it's a lawful decision. Waging war unlawfully, however, should be something that outrages everyone because it sends a loud message to other nations in the world. China thinking about Taiwan, Russia thinking about Ukraine, North Korea thinking about South Korea, Iran thinking about neighbors such as Iraq or Yemen. When the United States engages in unlawful attacks on other nations' sovereignty, it sends a message to the worst dictators in the world that they can do so as well. And I don't want the United States to send the message that anything goes. I want the United States to send a message that supports human rights and the rule of law.
Next, we'll go with Theo with the Washington Post.
Hey, Theo.
Hi, Senator. Happy New Year, and thanks so much for holding this call. Can you be any more specific? You said that the administration lied to Congress. Can you be more specific about when did Secretaries Rubio and Hegseth, for instance, when they briefed Congress last month, do you think they lied to lawmakers?
Members of congressional leadership have told me, I haven't been invited to these briefings, save for the one briefing that occurred right before we went on recess, but members of congressional leadership have told me that they have been repeatedly told by the administration that this was not an effort to change the regime in Venezuela. And so I'm not going to quote colleagues, but I believe some colleagues are already out and saying that. I will say that when we received briefings most recently in classified setting, finally a briefing for all 100 senators, there was no suggestion, none, by this administration that the purpose behind this military action was to change the regime. I believed that was likely a purpose, just as the seizure of oil was likely a purpose. But in the classified setting we had, and in the legal memo that I've reviewed, the administration has premised its action purely on the narco-trafficking rationale, which to many of us seems specious following the pardon of Juan Orlando Hernandez, one of the biggest narco-traffickers that the United States has ever prosecuted in the American courts.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Siobhan at the Wall Street Journal.
Hi, Senator. Thanks for doing this. Can you talk about how this is going to affect the appropriations process? Is it either like slowing a time agreement on defense approps, or could there be another shutdown? Does this issue rise to that level?
If we have a robust appropriations process that includes floor amendments, that would be fine. That we have a pending amendment. Senator Markley has filed one that I have suggesting that no funds, defense appropriated funds, can be used to prosecute military action in Venezuela. We should insist upon a vote on that. And it's often the case that appropriations bills or defense bills receive floor votes. We just had a vote on the National Defense Authorizing Act that had floor votes connected with it. We can do the same on the appropriations bill in January. So there's no reason for this to delay appropriations unless people are afraid to go on record and vote on whether or not they support military funding for a war in Venezuela. And nobody who's a US senator who's worth their salt should be afraid to cast a vote on a matter of such moment.
Do you have any commitments from GOP leadership that there will be such a vote?
That's a premature question. We come back the day after tomorrow, and we have not been in since the 19th of December, but that will be something that we will take up and insist upon.
Next, we'll go to Abby from the Financial Times.
Hi, Senator. Thanks for doing this. I'd like you to speculate a bit more about how you expect the U.S. will run Venezuela. I know you mentioned the failed U.S. efforts in Iraq and Afghanistan. So just legal questions aside, what do you anticipate as being the greatest practical obstacles to the U.S., quote, running Venezuela going forward, or what kinds of hypotheticals concern you the most about that effort?
Well, I would say, first, do we have the competence to do it? Second, would we be able to do it without U.S. personnel involved being at risk of their own physical safety? And third, look, Donald Trump has a habit of looting organizations he's connected to. And the statements that he's made that this is an effort for the U.S. companies to go in and seize oil suggests that it's an effort to loot Venezuelan resources. Traditionally, those that loot a country do not do a good job of managing a country. And you can look at that both in U.S. history, but also in the history of other nations around the world. Looting a nation is contrary to governing a nation. And that would be my chief worry about Donald Trump and those that he would entrust with this completely ridiculous mission.
Next, we'll go to Melanie from NBC News. All right, Melanie, we can't hear you, so we're going to jump ahead to Jesus from La Opinion.
Thank you, Senator, for doing this. I want to start with this question. Basically, I would link the other one. What is the U.S. and international laws has the Trump administration possibly violated with this operation in Venezuela? Basically,
the U.S. military to engage in military action requires both a domestic legal rationale and an international legal rationale. I have not been provided by the administration either a domestic or legal rationale for this action. However, I do consider myself as an attorney who was focused on this during my entire 13 years in the Senate and who has upheld the same standard to both Democratic and Republican administrations. I do consider myself a bit of an expert on the domestic legal rationale question. And the bottom line is, under our constitutional form of government, the U.S. cannot enter into military action against another nation. And Venezuela is a sovereign nation, whether or not we like its leader. We cannot enter into action against that nation or its leadership absent a vote of Congress, unless such action is necessary to defend the United States from ongoing or imminent military attack. There is no argument that the government of Venezuela was engaged in a military attack against the United States or threatening an imminent military attack against the United States. Thus, there is zero legal rationale for waging war within or against Venezuela without a vote of Congress. Congress has not only voted, Congress was not notified, Congress is not consulted with, there's been no debate within Congress. Congress has even refused to hold a single public hearing about this Trump misadventure since the very beginning of it on September 2nd. Thus, it's illegal. I can speculate about the illegality of this attack under international law. Nations generally are required to refrain from invading the sovereignty of other nations. That's why the United States is supporting Ukraine against the illegal invasion by Russia. It's an illegal invasion of another sovereign nation's sovereignty that violates international law. And I believe the same would be the case here.
Okay, that is all the time we have today, folks. Thank you so much for joining. Have a great rest of your day, and we will send a video shortly.
Thanks, Senator.
Recording stopped.